It is the year 476 AD. A Germanic warlord named Odoacer walks into Ravenna, deposes a teenage boy named Romulus Augustulus, and in a single afternoon ends the greatest empire the world has ever seen. Over 1,000 years of Roman power. Gone. Just like that. But what if it didn't happen? What if Rome held on? What if the soldiers held the line, the emperors made smarter choices, and the empire refused to die? How different would your world look right now today, in the 21st century? The answer is almost unrecognizable. A world without the Dark Ages. Here's the thing most people don't realize. The fall of Rome didn't just end an empire. It switched off the lights of civilization for nearly 1,000 years. Roads crumbled, libraries burned. The vast aqueduct systems that delivered clean water to millions of people fell into disrepair. Literacy rates collapsed. Trade networks that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia simply vanished. Historians call what followed the Dark Ages, and that name is not an exaggeration. Rome, at its peak, had a population of over 1 million people. It would take Europe until the 19th century to build a city that large again. Now imagine none of that collapse ever happened. The Industrial Revolution. 1,000 years early Roman engineers were staggering. They built concrete that is still standing today, concrete that is actually stronger now than when it was poured. They had underfloor heating systems. They had cranes, hydraulic mining, and proto-steam devices. A Greek engineer living under Roman rule named Hero of Alexandria actually invented a rudimentary steam engine in the 1st century AD. He called it the Iolipile. Rome looked at it and used it as a party trick. Why? Because they had slaves, millions of them. There was no economic pressure to replace human labor with machines. But here's where it gets fascinating. Historians and economists, including researchers publishing in peer-reviewed journals, have argued that if Roman slave-based labor had gradually declined through reform, rebellion, or economic shift, Rome would have faced the exact pressure that drove Britain to industrialize in the 1700s. The infrastructure was already there. The trade networks were already there. The engineering knowledge was already there. A surviving Roman Empire might have triggered an industrial revolution somewhere around the 8th or 9th century AD. That's roughly 1,000 years ahead of schedule. Think about what that means. If the Industrial Revolution happened in 800 AD, where would technology be today? We might have already colonized Mars. We might have cured cancer centuries ago. The gap between what humanity is and what it could have been is almost too large to imagine. One language, one law, one world. There's another consequence nobody talks about enough. Language? The fall of Rome shattered Latin into dozens of fragments: Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian. Beautiful languages, yes, but also the source of centuries of misunderstanding, nationalism, and war. Europe spent the next 1,500 years fighting itself, partly because its people could no longer understand each other. A surviving Roman Empire likely means a unified Latin-based language across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. It means a single legal code, Roman law, which already formed the foundation of most modern legal systems anyway. It means no 100 Years' War, possibly no World War I, possibly no World War II. The borders that tore the world apart for centuries simply never get drawn. But here's the dark side. Before you get too excited, not everything about this world is better. Rome was built on slavery. At its height, roughly 30 to 40% of the Italian population were enslaved human beings. A Rome that never falls might be a Rome where abolition never happens, or happens centuries later than it did in our world. The Enlightenment, that explosion of ideas about individual rights, democracy, and human dignity grew partly from the chaos that followed Rome's fall. Competing kingdoms, competing churches, competing philosophers, all fighting for dominance, accidentally produced the intellectual freedom that gave us modern democracy. A unified Roman superstate might have been too stable, too controlled, too powerful for dissent to survive. Would you have freedom of speech under an eternal Roman emperor? Almost certainly not. The verdict. A Rome that never falls gives humanity faster technology, fewer wars, cleaner cities, and a more connected world. But it might also give humanity permanent authoritarianism, an empire with no real challenger, no revolution, and no Bill of Rights. The Rome that fell gave us darkness, but from that darkness eventually came democracy, science, and individual freedom. Maybe the fall of Rome wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was, in the most painful possible way, a beginning. What do you think? Would you trade the modern world for a Roman one? Tell us in the comments.